The faint, metallic tang of stale coffee in the morning air was a cruel counterpoint to the scent of white roses I should have been inhaling. 6 o'clock. My wedding day. And here I was, clocking in. The office was a cavern of muted shadows, the only significant illumination bleeding from the emergency lights and a stark, rectangular glow in the far corner, Roman's office. He was already there, a silhouette hunched over his desk, a ghost in the pre-dawn quiet. I felt his gaze, a prickle on the back of my neck, as I walked the familiar path to my own cubicle. My ceremony started at 3 this afternoon. Roman had scheduled me until 4. My phone buzzed, a soft vibration against my thigh, a stark reminder of the world beyond these gray walls. It was Rachel. "You're really doing this?" I typed back, my fingers moving with a practiced speed that belied the tremor in my chest. "I'm really doing this." "I trust you, then, a concession to the gnawing anxiety that had become my constant companion, but if this doesn't work, we're eloping in Vegas with whatever money we have left. Deal, a second later, her reply flashed, deal, a thin smile touched my lips, quickly fading. Trust. That was the core of it, wasn't it? Not just with Rachel, but with the man who claimed to own this company, Frank. He'd asked for my trust, promised me I wouldn't regret it. But the hours were ticking, and the silence from him was deafening. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a battle for dignity, a quiet insurgency against a petty tyrant. And I was standing on the front line, my biggest weapon a meticulously built paper trail and a stubborn refusal to be broken. To understand the coiled tension in my shoulders, the tight knot in my stomach, one needed to know how we got here. 8 months earlier, my life had been normal. Fulfilling, even. I was Tyler, 31, a commercial HVAC systems salesman for Thermal Solutions. My clients weren't individuals, they were contractors, property developers, the architects of soaring office buildings and sprawling hospital wings. When a 12-story tower needed precise climate control, or a hospital expansion demanded a system capable of keeping operating rooms sterile, they called me. My average sale floated between $80,000 and $300,000, and with a 4% commission, every closed contract felt like another brick laid in the foundation of Rachel's and my future. A piece of the wedding, a segment of the honeymoon. Missing work wasn't a casual decision, it was a financial sacrifice. I'd been with Thermal Solutions for 5 years, and for 7 straight quarters, I'd been the company's top performer. My last quarter alone, I'd closed $1.2 million in sales. The guy trailing me had barely scraped $780,000. Before that, $950,000. Then $1.1 million. I wasn't just good, I was indispensable. My secret wasn't some arcane sales technique, it was disarmingly simple. I treated people like humans, not transactions. A contractor called at 7 in the evening, frantic because a client had changed system placement, rendering all the load calculations useless. I fixed it. A property manager needed emergency specs for a city permit hearing by 8 the next morning. I delivered them by midnight. A designer, particular about aesthetics, wanted to know if a specific model came in stainless steel to match a high-end kitchen. I tracked down photos, even if it meant calling the manufacturer directly. That kind of relentless follow-through, that personal investment, forged fierce loyalty. Clients protected me. When their customers started sniffing around for competitive bids, I'd get a quiet heads-up, an early warning. When a project demanded someone reliable, I was the first call. By my 5th year, I'd cultivated relationships that generated 7 figures in revenue annually. My then manager, Diane, understood this symbiotic relationship implicitly. She presided over our region for nearly a decade, her philosophy a refreshing antidote to typical corporate jargon: hit your numbers, handle your accounts, don't cause problems. Everything else was negotiable. She treated us like adults, granting autonomy and trust. If your performance was solid, time off was approved without drama. She saw the bigger picture, the long game of client retention and employee satisfaction. Meanwhile, Rachel and I were caught up in the joyous, chaotic whirlwind of planning our wedding. For years we'd been together. I'd met her at a friend's lake house party, an oasis of calm amidst the drunken revelry. She was the only sober person, the lone voice of reason, deftly preventing a misguided jet ski from becoming intimate with a doc. She worked as a hospital administrator, a maestro of surgical scheduling. Organized chaos was her professional milieu. I'd watched her, fascinated, as she calmly reshuffled 3 surgical procedures while simultaneously resolving a critical supply shortage for an emergency operation. Nothing rattled her. Absolutely nothing. I proposed at that same lake house, the following October, just us, on the dock after everyone else had retreated to bed. No grand gestures, no audience, no performance. She said yes before I'd even finished the question, launching into a rapid-fire monologue about venue options and guest lists while I was still on one knee, a goofy grin plastered across my face. Her parents, bless them, offered to contribute significantly, and with her dad's retirement looming the following year, we established a clear timeline. We settled on a Saturday in June, 14 months out. Ideal weather, easy travel for family and friends. The venue was a vineyard, an hour outside the city, with space for 180 guests. The deposit alone was $12,000. Photography, $4,500. Flowers, $3,000. Catering, at $90 a head for 180 people, tallied up to $16,200. Add the DJ, rentals, invitations, and the total hovered around $48,000. Her parents generously covered half. We handled the rest, drawing from my commissions and our meticulously saved funds. 8 months before the wedding, I submitted my time-off request, 2 days before the wedding, the day of, and 2 days after. Attached were the venue contract and a brief note explaining the occasion. Diane approved it within half an hour, her email a warm note of congratulations. She mentioned having attended an event at the vineyard before and praised its beauty. The company system then generated a formal approval, bearing her digital signature. I printed it, a tangible confirmation of our plans, and filed it away with our other wedding documents. Life hummed along, a steady, predictable rhythm. I continued to exceed my quotas, mentored a new sales guy, and gently, playfully, prevented Rachel from inviting her entire hospital floor to the reception. Our office was a regional hub, encompassing 3 states, 22 salespeople, a dozen support staff, engineers, admin, a miniature ecosystem of commercial enterprise. My territory alone held enough contractors and property managers to generate $2 million in potential sales each year, and a significant majority preferred working with me. Other reps tried to emulate my relationship-based approach, but few possessed the sustained dedication required for true follow-through. Then, one afternoon in March, the first tremor. Diane called me into her office. Her expression was a curious blend of excitement and apprehension. "I got promoted," she announced, a small, proud smile touching her lips. "VP of Regional Operations. Corporate called this morning." The excitement faded, replaced by a subtle tension. "They're filling my position next week." I blinked, processing the news. "With who?" "New guy named Roman. Corporate hire. Strong performance numbers where he came from, but," she paused, her gaze steady, "watch yourself. He's got climber energy." "What does that mean?" I asked, feeling a faint unease. "Keep your documentation clean and your numbers up," she advised, her voice dropping slightly. "He's the kind who needs to make a mark fast. Sometimes that means shaking things up just to prove he can." I nodded, not truly worried. My wedding was 3 months away. My performance was rock solid. Every approval was documented, tucked away safely. As long as I kept doing my job, diligently and effectively, nothing could go wrong. I was, as it turned out, spectacularly, completely wrong. But at the time, blissfully ignorant, I had no idea what was coming. Roman arrived the following Monday, a stark contrast to Diane's approachable warmth. His suit, impeccably tailored, probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. He immediately summoned everyone for a mandatory all-hands meeting before business hours even began. At 7:30 a.m., we stood in the conference room, Roman positioned at the head of the polished table like a general before his troops. He proceeded to dissect, in excruciating detail, everything he perceived we were doing wrong. Our customer service approach, he declared, was outdated, too relationship-focused. Our sales methodology lacked discipline. Our work ethic showed signs of complacency. Diane's management style, he implied, had been far too permissive. All this, delivered to a team that had consistently been the top-performing region in the company for 4 straight years. Roman was perhaps 42, ambitious in that ruthless, corporate climber way where everything was a battleground, every person either a strategic asset or expendable deadweight. He made it abundantly clear that he viewed our region as a mere stepping stone, a launchpad to his next executive role within 12 to 18 months. We weren't individuals with families or lives, we were performance metrics, numbers on a spreadsheet. At one point, he uttered the phrase leverage human capital optimization without a trace of irony, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. His new mantra was stark, unyielding: loyalty is attendance. Be here. Be present. Be committed to the organization over personal convenience. Then came the changes, a rapid-fire assault on everything we'd known. New sales quotas, 25% higher than previous targets, with no adjustment period. Mandatory morning meetings at 7 a.m., even though most of our contractor clients didn't start answering phones until 8:30. A new policy requiring his written approval for any contract exceeding $100,000. Suddenly, I needed permission for roughly 70% of my deals. And he dragged every single deal through molasses. He'd scrutinize technical specs line by line, question pricing that perfectly aligned with industry standards, push for higher margin equipment clients didn't actually need, and generally create such bureaucratic hurdles that deals which once took 48 hours now languished for a week or more. Clients grew frustrated. Some, I heard through the grapevine, walked away entirely. Where Diane had fostered trust, Roman fostered an environment of suspicion and control. Hit your numbers, act like a professional, and you were treated like one under Diane. Under Roman, time off became a privilege, an indulgence to be earned only by exceeding his ever-shifting, increasingly arbitrary expectations. Company policy didn't matter. Precedent didn't matter. Approvals don't transfer, he declared, wiping the slate clean. Anything Diane had approved was, according to him, meaningless. He swiftly proved he meant it. Within his first few weeks, Roman summoned Monica from support into his office and revoked the vacation she'd requested 5 months earlier, approved by Diane. She'd already purchased non-refundable plane tickets for herself and her children, arranged coverage with 2 team members. Roman simply informed her that personal plans were subordinate to business needs during his restructuring period. Monica resigned via email that same afternoon, without even returning to her desk. The quiet fury of that act resonated through the office, a low, unsettling hum. Next was Ben from engineering support. His father was scheduled for major heart surgery, and Ben had secured approved leave months ago. A week before the operation, Roman revoked it, stating that engineering couldn't afford gaps during peak proposal season and that family medical issues weren't legitimate operational emergencies. Ben, a man whose quiet devotion to his family was well known, chose his father. He was subsequently terminated for job abandonment, a label softened to voluntary resignation to avoid unemployment complications. He made it to the hospital in time, but the wound of that injustice, I knew, would not heal quickly. Then he went after Christina from contracts. Her daughter's high school graduation fell on a Thursday. She'd meticulously arranged coverage months in advance. Roman, reviewing the pending requests, called her into his office and presented a brutal ultimatum: attend the graduation or demonstrate commitment to the team. Not both. Christina, her eyes blazing with a quiet defiance, chose her daughter. She was terminated the next morning for prioritizing personal events over critical business functions. Whispers began to circulate, hushed and furtive. But not within the building. Roman had a disconcerting habit of appearing silently in doorways, his presence an oppressive weight, his gaze sweeping the room. Conversations moved to parking lots before shifts, hushed coffee shop corners during lunch breaks, encrypted chats after hours. Everyone reached the same chilling conclusion: he was purging the department. If he made the environment miserable enough, people would quit on their own. Then he could hire cheaper replacements, individuals loyal only to him, and claim he'd improved efficiency by cutting costs and optimizing resources. I kept my head down. My wedding was 3 months away, every commission check a precious contribution to its carefully constructed reality. I couldn't afford to become a target. I exceeded every quota he set. I maintained an impassive politeness, documented everything, never offered him a single shred of ammunition. But I watched. He scheduled people for shifts they'd explicitly marked unavailable months earlier, then acted genuinely shocked when they couldn't make it. He openly criticized employees in front of clients, a brutal display designed to assert dominance. He altered policies without warning, then wrote people up for violating rules they didn't even know existed. And he demanded to be addressed as Mr., not Roman. It reinforces organizational hierarchy, he'd explained. Anyone who slipped and used his first name was corrected publicly and sharply. What struck all of us wasn't merely his strictness. It was his active cruelty, the deliberate, calculated nature of every decision, seemingly designed to remind us, with each passing day, who held the power and who didn't. As the weeks bled into each other, it became painfully obvious Roman wasn't managing a region. He was building a kingdom, and the rest of us were expected to serve. The call came on a Tuesday morning in mid-March, exactly 11 weeks before my wedding. I'd just closed a $220,000 hospital HVAC retrofit, the culmination of 2 months of intense negotiations. The client was ecstatic, the contractor relieved. My commission on that single deal was $8,800, enough to cover our honeymoon flights and most of the hotel. His office door was open, an invitation, but he gestured for me to close it behind me. Never a good sign. He sat behind his polished desk, his laptop a glowing barrier between us. "I've reviewed your time-off request for June," he stated, his eyes fixed on the screen, his tone flat, devoid of emotion. "I'm revoking it, effective immediately." I stood there, the words hanging in the air, trying to make sense of them. My wedding. I'd submitted that request 8 months ago. Diane had approved it. He finally rotated the laptop screen towards me. There it was, my request, still in the system, Diane's approval. Clearly visible, complete with timestamp and confirmation number. "Previous management's decisions don't transfer to my authority," he declared, as if reciting from a corporate handbook. "I'm restructuring time-off protocols across the board, and your requested dates fall during our peak proposal season for commercial projects. You need to be here." "That's in 11 weeks, I heard myself say, my voice strangely calm, a desperate rationality clinging to the absurdity of the situation. "I have 180 guests traveling from 6 different states. The venue contract is $48,000. Everything's been paid for in non-refundable deposits. The caterer, the photographer, the flowers, everything." He leaned back in his chair, a slow, deliberate movement. "Should have considered that before scheduling personal events during critical business periods. This is about demonstrating commitment to new leadership. You're our top performer on paper. Your presence sets expectations for the rest of the team during this transition." My hand instinctively went to my wallet, pulling out the printed approval document I kept there. I unfolded it carefully, the paper crisp. "This is an officially approved request, with full documentation. Company policy clearly states you need to provide 4 weeks' notice for revocations, and only for legitimate operational emergencies." He reached across the desk, his fingers cool and dry as they plucked the document directly from my hand. Without breaking eye contact, he slowly tore it in half, then in half again. The soft rip was shockingly loud in the quiet office. He dropped the 4 pieces into his desk trash can. "Diane's signature isn't a contract. It's a suggestion I don't accept. And I'm the manager now, so that paper means absolutely nothing. You can be here, or you can find somewhere else to work. Your choice. Though I'd hate to lose someone with your sales record over a personal scheduling conflict that could easily be resolved through better priorities. My jaw clenched, a muscle jumping in my cheek. My hands balled into fists at my sides, knuckles white, but I didn't yell. Didn't argue. Didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. I simply nodded once, a terse, controlled movement, and walked out of his office without saying another word. The first move, the second I reached my car in the deserted parking lot, was to forward every single piece of documentation to my personal email account. The original time-off request. Diane's approval email, complete with her congratulations. The system-generated confirmation document. Screenshots of the request in the company portal, showing its active approval status before he'd ever touched it. Everything archived outside company servers, beyond his reach, where he couldn't delete or modify it. The second move was to open a new document on my phone and meticulously type out everything that had just transpired, while the details were still sharp, the indignity still fresh. Date, time, exact location, what I'd said, what he'd said, how he'd physically torn up the approval document. Detailed notes, with timestamps. That, too, I forwarded to my personal email. My third move, request a formal meeting with HR through the company portal. I attached all the documents I'd just archived. I drafted a detailed explanation of the situation, outlining the full timeline from the original request to the current, unjust revocation. I noted the significant, non-refundable financial commitments already made. And I formally requested they enforce the original approval, as per stated company policy. Then, I waited. 3 days crawled by, each hour an agonizing stretch. I checked my email incessantly, maintaining a facade of normalcy at work. 3 days of Rachel asking if HR had responded yet, and me, each time, having to say, no. Not yet. I'm sure they're reviewing everything. 3 days of seeing Roman in meetings, his expression smug, utterly confident in his dominion. When HR finally sent a meeting request, it was with Andrea, the regional HR director, for 9 a.m. the following morning, before my regular shift. I arrived 15 minutes early, a folder clutched in my hand, filled with printed copies of everything, every email, every document, every screenshot. The approval, the policy stating revocation requirements. All meticulously organized. I believed, naively, that this would be straightforward. A clear policy violation, a written approval with a timestamp, non-refundable financial commitments. Justice, I thought, would be swift and clear. I was, again, completely wrong. Andrea had Roman's written statement pulled up on her screen when I arrived precisely at 9 a.m. According to his version, he'd informed the entire team during his first week that all previous time-off approvals were subject to review and potential revision under new management priorities, and that everyone, including me, had acknowledged understanding this policy change in writing. He further claimed I'd specifically agreed in a one-on-one meeting to maintain flexibility with personal scheduling if business needs required it. A complete fabrication. That conversation never happened. There was no written acknowledgement because I'd never seen any such policy. I presented my documentation, the email chain with Diane, the approval with its clear 8-month-old timestamp, the system-generated confirmation document bearing Diane's digital signature, the policy handbook sections detailing the 4-week notice requirement for revocations. Everything laid out chronologically, a damning timeline. She reviewed it all, her gaze unreadable, then delivered the verdict. Management has discretionary authority to revoke approved PTO requests for operational requirements. Roman is implementing new protocols that fall within his managerial authority. While I understand this creates personal hardship, the company supports management's operational decision-making during peak business cycles. I asked one simple, direct question. What specific operational emergency requires revoking approved time off that was submitted 8 months in advance? She simply repeated the same boilerplate about peak season and discretionary authority. She wouldn't answer anything concrete. Just kept cycling back to management discretion and operational requirements. I tried a different angle. The company policy handbook states 4 weeks' notice is required for revocations. He gave me 11 weeks, technically, but the principle is the same. What's the documented operational emergency? She pulled up an internal document, one I'd never seen before, showing that exceptions could be made at management discretion for seasonal operational needs. I asked when that policy had been added. She claimed it had always been there, but previous managers hadn't enforced it strictly. I asked if there was any appeals process. She said I could file a formal complaint, but that review would take 6 to 8 weeks minimum, and the decision would likely be upheld anyway. I left that meeting understanding with perfect clarity that the system was designed to protect management, regardless of documentation or policy. HR wasn't neutral, they were institutional protection for whoever wielded authority. I told Rachel that night. She was working on the final headcount for the caterer when I got home, and knew immediately, from the defeated slump in my shoulders, that something catastrophic had happened. "We're about to lose $24,000 and burn your parents' money," I said, the words tasting like ash, "because your boss wants to prove he owns you." "I'm not letting that happen," she declared, her eyes flashing. "But how?" "You escalated to HR, and they backed him. If you don't show up, you're fired. If you quit, we lose your income right before the wedding, and you lose unvested commission on closed deals." Every option, it seemed, led to the same abysmal outcome. But I wasn't rolling over. Not for Roman. I called Diane that night. When I explained the situation, her response was immediate fury, a slow burn that deepened as I recounted Roman's abuses. "Roman's been making enemies across regions with this exact behavior," she said, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "Corporates had complaints, but nothing concrete enough to act on. You need to go straight to the owner." The owner was Frank, the man who had founded Thermal Solutions 32 years ago. He still showed up randomly, still talked to the salespeople, supposedly still cared about the company culture he'd painstakingly built. I'd met him twice during company events, a distant, benevolent figure. "Email him directly," Diane urged, her tone urgent, precise. "Frank responds to numbers and documented patterns. Give him both. Your sales record, the approval timeline," what HR said. "And make sure he knows this isn't isolated. Roman's done this to 3 people already. You're the first with documentation to prove a pattern." I spent 2 hours writing that email, each word carefully chosen, each sentence stripped of emotion, adhering only to fact. I opened with my sales record for 7 quarters, specific numbers that couldn't be disputed. Then the timeline of my request and approval. Roman's revocation, the flimsy grounds he cited. HR's stonewalling response. Then, crucially, the 3 previous incidents, Monica, Ben, and Christina. Names, dates, outcomes, the undeniable pattern of abuse. I attached every document, every screenshot, every email I had meticulously archived. I sent it at 11:30 at night, then slumped back in my chair, the hollow ache in my stomach a little lighter, but far from gone. Meanwhile, a quiet network of resistance had begun to form. People from the office reached out, cautiously. Monica found me at a coffee shop 2 days later, a slim folder of emails in her hand. She mentioned rumors about why HR had protected Roman, but couldn't confirm anything concrete. "Watch yourself," she'd warned, her eyes filled with a weary wisdom. "The system is rigged." Ben, from engineering support, sent me encrypted copies of his termination paperwork. Christina shared her exit documents. I now possessed a paper trail not just of my own plight, but of a systematic campaign of abuse. 5 days before the wedding, Roman posted the schedule. There it was, stark and unapologetic, my name, scheduled for a full shift on my wedding day, 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. My ceremony, a quiet whisper in the back of my mind, started at 3 p.m. I walked to his office one last time. The door was open. He was reviewing reports, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. "You scheduled me for a full shift on my wedding day." He didn't look up. "That's correct." Guess you're making a choice about priorities. Be here or be terminated for job abandonment, I finished for him, the words echoing the cruelty he'd inflicted on others. This violates company policy. He finally made eye contact, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. Then file a complaint, and we'll review it in 6 to 8 weeks. But that ceremony is in 5 days, so the timeline doesn't work in your favor. I pulled up my phone and started typing notes, documenting this conversation, date, time, his exact words. He watched me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. You think documentation matters? I'm management. Your little files don't change reality. We'll see, I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor in my hands. Anything else you want on record? He leaned back, a smug satisfaction radiating from him. Feelings don't hit quota. If you're not loyal enough to be here during our busiest season, maybe this isn't the right company for you. I nodded, a brief dip of my head, and turned to leave. As my hand touched the doorknob, I heard him say one more thing, his voice low, dismissive. Some people learn the hard way that personal lives are subordinate to professional commitments. I made a note of that, too. Added it to everything else. Frank responded 48 hours before my wedding. I was home, stressed into a state of wired insomnia, checking my email obsessively, my hope a thin, flickering flame. Then, his response appeared. The email thanked me for the documentation, stating he'd spent 2 days reviewing complaints about Roman from 4 regional offices. What I'd sent, he wrote, was the most detailed proof of a pattern they'd been tracking. Then he said something that made me read it 3 times, a wave of surreal disbelief washing over me. He had a plan. And it required me to show up for my shift on my wedding day, exactly as scheduled. The rest was vague. Corporate and legal were involved, he stated. Something about needing concrete evidence with witnesses that couldn't be disputed. He couldn't give details in writing for legal reasons, but he promised I wouldn't regret trusting him. Show up for your shift. Stay calm. Watch what happens at noon. The final line was direct, a firm hand on my shoulder through the screen. You've been loyal to this company for 5 years and built relationships that generate 7-figure revenue. That's the kind of employee we protect. Trust me. I showed Rachel. She read it twice, her brow furrowed in concentration, then a slow, incredulous smile spread across her face. Frank is actually going to do this, she whispered, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. This is insane. What if it doesn't work? Then we're in the same place we'd be if I don't show up and get fired, I reasoned, trying to sound more confident than I felt. At least this way there's a plan. She thought about it for a solid minute, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond the 4 walls of our living room. Okay, she finally said, a resolute glint in her eyes. We trust him. But I'm not sitting at home while this happens. If you're going to be there, so am I. And so, back to 6 a.m. on my wedding day. Roman saw me clock in. His lips curled into a smirk, a silent, triumphant sneer. Actually showed up. That's what loyalty looks like. I didn't respond. Just walked to my desk, my spine stiff, and began my normal routine. Checked emails. Followed up on proposals. Prepared for calls. Every action controlled, deliberate, a silent defiance. The morning crawled. I handled 2 client calls, revised hospital project specs, kept checking my phone, hoping for a sign from Frank. Nothing. By 11 a.m., a cold dread had begun to curl in my gut. Ceremony in 4 hours. Guests traveling to the venue. Photographer would arrive at 2 p.m. Then, at 11:45 a.m., the first crack in Roman's carefully constructed reality appeared. Monica walked in. The same Monica who had quit weeks ago, whose vacation Roman had revoked. She had no reason to be here. She went straight to the conference room, her gaze fixed, not acknowledging anyone. 10 minutes later, Christina showed up. Then two people from other regional offices, faces I vaguely recognized from company events. All heading to the conference room. Roman, perched in his glass-walled office, noticed the unusual procession. He went to investigate, his voice escalating moments later. A minute after that, he stormed back, eyes scanning the office, looking for me. "Why are former employees in my office?" he demanded, his voice thin with outrage. "Do you know anything about this?" I met his gaze, feigning innocent surprise. "No idea. Maybe they're here for meetings." I watched him, a slow, deep breath filling my lungs. He didn't believe me, but he couldn't prove anything. He stalked back to his office, probably to call security. At noon exactly, things accelerated, a whirlwind of orchestrated chaos. The group emerged from the conference room and began to move furniture in our attached showroom and training floor. This was the space where we kept full HVAC system displays, where we conducted client demonstrations, about 1,500 square feet of open space with industrial ceilings and equipment displays that could be pushed aside. Monica, her face grimly determined, was directing people with clear purpose, brandishing what looked like actual floor plans. Frank, it turned out, had reserved the space through building management days earlier for what he'd listed as a corporate event. They pushed display units against walls, cleared the center completely, started setting up chairs in perfectly measured rows, an aisle down the middle. More people arrived, carrying boxes of white fabric and professional quality flower arrangements. Not the cheap grocery store stuff, these were proper wedding flowers, matching what we'd ordered for the vineyard. They were transforming the showroom into an actual wedding venue. Roman came running out of his office, his face contorted in disbelief and rage. "What the heck is this? Everyone stop right now. You're all trespassing on private company property. I'm calling the police and corporate immediately." Nobody stopped working. Nobody even acknowledged him. More people streamed through the entrance. They started hanging white fabric from the industrial ceiling mounts we normally used for equipment demonstrations, arranging chairs in sections, setting up the flower arch we'd ordered for the vineyard. Someone wheeled in a high-end sound system. Someone else started laying down a pristine white runner down the center aisle. This wasn't improvised. This was planned down to the inch. Roman was yelling now, his voice cracking, high-pitched with fury. "Everyone is fired. Every single person here is terminated effective immediately. This is property destruction. This is disruption of business operations. I'm calling Frank right now and every one of you is personally getting sued for damages." He pulled out his phone, dialing frantically, his fingers trembling. The setup continued around him, a calm, inexorable tide. White fabric went up on the walls. The flower arrangements were positioned at the end of each row. Someone started testing the sound system with soft acoustic guitar music. Someone else was setting up what looked like professional lighting equipment on stands. A catering truck pulled up outside the front entrance, visible through the wide showroom windows, and people began unloading covered trays. Two clients had been in the office earlier for scheduled appointments. Tom, a contractor I'd worked with for 3 years, had arrived at 10 a.m. for a contract review and was still there, finishing up paperwork. Jennifer, from a property management firm, had shown up at 10:30 a.m. for a system spec consultation, and we'd been working through her project timeline when chaos erupted. They were both standing near the reception desk, looking utterly bewildered. Tom, without hesitation, pulled out his phone and started recording everything. Jennifer was taking photos, her mouth literally hanging open. Roman noticed the clients, his eyes widening. "Stop recording me. Put those phones away right now. This is private property. You don't have legal permission to record. Put them away immediately or I'll have you removed." He looked around frantically at all the people, all the phones, all the evidence being captured in real time from multiple angles. He looked at the impossible transformation happening despite his direct orders. And then he looked at me, standing calmly at my desk, watching everything unfold, a faint, slow smile finally touching my lips. You organized this, he hissed, his finger jabbing in my direction, accusation dripping from his words. This is sabotage. This is insubordination. You're all getting arrested for this. I didn't say anything. Just stood there, utterly still, and let him dig himself deeper on camera. Then Rachel walked through the front entrance. My breath caught in my throat. She wore her wedding dress, full formal white, with a cathedral train that must have been 6 feet long, perfectly pressed, her hair and makeup professionally done, carrying her bouquet of white roses. She walked calmly past Roman, who'd actually stopped mid-sentence to stare at her, past the confused clients with their phones out, recording everything, past all the organized chaos of people decorating and setting up, and came straight across the office floor to where I was standing at my desk. Our ceremony starts at 3 p.m., she said, her voice clear and strong, loud enough for everyone in the office to hear, including the clients and everyone who'd stopped working to watch this surreal scene unfold. He scheduled you until 4 p.m. on our wedding day after revoking time off that was approved 8 months ago with full written documentation. I'm here so nobody can pretend this didn't happen. So there are witnesses to exactly what happens when someone abuses their authority this severely. Silence. The people setting up froze. The clients' phones were both pointed directly at Roman. Now, someone from the catering crew had come inside and was also recording on their phone. At least 6 different phones, capturing everything from different angles. Frank's legal team had clearly told everyone how to document this properly before they arrived. Put the phones away. Roman shrieked, his voice losing all semblance of control. This is harassment. This is a coordinated attack on my authority. Then Frank walked through the front entrance. The owner of the entire company, flanked by Diane and 3 people from corporate legal. Behind them, 2 impeccably dressed suits from an external employment law firm. Roman froze, his face going ashen. Roman, stop talking, Frank's voice was calm, cutting through the hysteria like a razor. You've done enough. What is this? These people are destroying, Roman stammered. You weren't enforcing policy, Roman. You were auditioning for power. Frank walked past him, his gaze fixed on me. He extended a hand and shook mine, his grip firm, his eyes twinkling with a shared secret. Hope you're ready for an interesting afternoon, Tyler. I couldn't form words. This was surreal, magnificent. Frank turned to the assembly of shocked onlookers and recording devices. We've been tracking systematic abuse of authority at multiple locations. Roman's been the biggest problem. He gestured to me. This employee submitted properly approved time off 8 months in advance. Every document was flawless. Then Roman revoked it 11 weeks out and scheduled him to work during his ceremony. That's not management discretion. That's abuse creating legal liability. Roman tried to defend himself, a desperate, pathetic attempt. I was establishing operational discipline. Loyalty is attendance. These people need to, you're not establishing anything anymore. Diane stepped forward, a stack of documents in her hand. We have cases of you canceling approved time off without legitimate need across 4 regional offices. 6 employees quit. 4 were terminated for choosing family over your arbitrary schedule changes. Her gaze flicked to the terrified Andrea, who had silently appeared from her office doorway. Andrea has been suspended pending investigation. Frank's tone turned to ice, colder than any HVAC system I'd ever sold. She's done. Security arrived, a private firm, not the building's usual guards. Frank pointed at Roman. Escort him out. He's terminated, effective immediately, for cause. If he attempts to return, call the police. You can't do this. Roman screamed, his voice raw with disbelief. I have contracts. I'll sue. I'll destroy. You signed an at-will agreement with behavior clauses, Frank interrupted, utterly unmoved. We have emails, timestamps, witness statements, and video from multiple phones. You're welcome to sue, but our legal team costs more than you'll ever make. Now leave. Security took Roman by each arm. He was screaming about lawsuits and corruption the entire way out, his voice fading to a pathetic wail as he was ushered through the front doors. Everyone watched him go, a collective release of breath filling the showroom. Once he was gone, Frank turned back to me, a glint in his eye. I need a new regional manager. Someone who understands relationships, respects approved time off, treats employees like professionals. You interested? I just got promoted at my own wedding. Yes. Good. Effective immediately. Diane handles transition next week. For now, you have a ceremony at 3. He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a check for $50,000, with a note tacked beneath it. Leadership incentive bonus for exemplary performance and retention of critical client relationships through adverse management conditions. For your honeymoon. You trusted us and kept detailed records. That's the leadership we need. Meanwhile, the venue coordinator, alerted to the change, was frantically redirecting guests. Mass texts went out with the new address and GPS coordinates. Shuttles that had been arranged for the vineyard got rerouted to the office. Staff positioned at the vineyard entrance handed arriving guests printed cards with directions and apologized for the last-minute change. A few guests who'd already arrived at the vineyard were personally escorted by company drivers Frank had arranged. The whole operation ran smoother than it had any right to. Professional decorators finished the showroom transformation. Tables were set up for the reception. A DJ positioned his equipment near the break room. At 2 p.m., the full wedding party arrived, shuttled directly from the hotel where they had been getting ready. Frank insisted on being part of the ceremony, a witness to the rearranged reality. The entire corporate team attended. Every employee from our office showed up. The contractors and property managers I'd worked with, who had witnessed the morning's surreal events, came too. Tom, the contractor who'd recorded everything, stood up with me. Monica stood up with Rachel. When we said our vows, I could see Roman's empty office in the background, a silent testament to the justice that had been served. The reception was surreal. We cut cake on a demonstration control panel. The DJ played next to thermostat displays. People danced in the main aisle, beneath the industrial ceilings now softened by white fabric. The refreshments were served from a granite sample countertop. Frank gave a speech about loyalty working both ways, about how companies should protect the employees who protect the company. Diane pulled me aside and promised full support, mentioning 2 other managers at different locations were under investigation. Roman wasn't an isolated incident, he was a symptom of a larger, systemic issue being addressed. Rachel and I had our first dance in the client consultation area. She was laughing, her head nestled against my shoulder. This is completely insane. Our office now. I'm the regional manager, I reminded her, the words feeling foreign, yet right. She kissed me, right there, in front of everyone. Best wedding ever. Our honeymoon was 3 weeks in Hawaii, using Frank's $50,000. We stayed at resorts we couldn't have afforded otherwise, decompressing, processing the whirlwind of events. When we returned, I stepped into my new position. My first policy change was simple, echoing the core of my own ordeal: approved time off gets honored unless there's a documented, legitimate emergency. Second, all management decisions in writing. Word spread fast. Employees from other regions, hearing of the change in culture, requested transfers. Within 3 months, we were fully staffed. Sales increased. Andrea was terminated after an investigation found multiple violations. They brought in someone new from outside. Monica and Christina were offered their positions back, with back pay and formal apology letters. Monica came back. Christina, having found a better situation, politely declined. Ben was also offered his position back but chose to stay at the job he'd found after leaving. Roman tried to sue. His lawyer sent letters for 4 months. Corporate's legal team responded with a 47-page brief, including timestamps, witness statements, and video evidence from multiple phones. His lawyers dropped it before discovery. Diane called monthly, checking on the transition. She'd been fighting behind the scenes more than I'd known. When Roman had first cancelled my time off, she'd gone to Frank with her concerns. That, it turned out, had started the entire investigation. The wedding photos, of all things, ended up in a business magazine article about unconventional corporate culture. We framed one and hung it in the office break room. Rachel tells the story at every family gathering, the disbelief always present in the listener's eyes. Nobody believes you got promoted during your wedding while your boss got escorted out by security, she'd say, a triumphant grin on her face. But we have the documentation. 7 months later, the arbitration hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday in January. Roman's lawyers had secured him a hearing to argue wrongful termination. Frank asked if I wanted to be there for the final confrontation. I showed up to the conference room at 9 a.m. Frank, Diane, and 2 corporate lawyers were already there. Roman arrived 10 minutes late with one lawyer who looked like he wished he'd taken a different case. The arbiter was a retired judge named Patterson, a man with a gravitas that filled the room. He reviewed documents for 30 minutes in silence, his gaze sharp, then started asking questions. Roman, you're claiming wrongful termination on what grounds? I was fired for implementing legitimate management policies, Roman stated, his voice regaining a touch of its old arrogance. They set me up because I was effective and threatened comfortable arrangements. The arbiter looked at documents, then at Roman. You cancelled approved time off for 6 employees in 3 months. Can you explain the operational necessity? I had authority to restructure schedules during critical business periods. The arbiter pulled out my request. This employee's wedding was approved 8 months in advance. You revoked it with 11 weeks' notice. What was the specific operational emergency? Roman hesitated, a flicker of panic in his eyes. Peak season required all top performers available for quarterly targets. Then why schedule him until 4 p.m. when his ceremony started at 3 p.m.? The arbiter's voice was like ice. Why specifically a schedule that guaranteed he'd miss his wedding? Silence. Roman didn't have an answer. His lawyer jumped in about management discretion. The arbiter cut him off, his hand raising. The specific hours demonstrate intent. He flipped through pages. 6 employees. 1 missed his father's surgery. 1 missed her daughter's graduation. 1 was terminated for her grandmother's funeral. All had approved time off cancelled. All under your management. All within 3 months. He closed the folder, a definitive thwack. This is termination for cause with overwhelming proof. Claim dismissed. Roman, you're responsible for arbitration costs per your agreement. Roman stood, fast enough that his chair fell with a loud clatter. This is corruption. I'll appeal to real court. The arbiter didn't look up. You can appeal, but this ruling stands. We're done here. Roman stared at me, his face contorted with hatred, a raw, primal fury. You destroyed my career over a wedding. 1 day. You ruined everything over 1 single day. I kept my voice completely calm, the words precise, unwavering. No, you destroyed your career by treating people like property. I just kept detailed records and trusted the right people at the right time. His lawyer grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the door, his face a mask of weary resignation. I watched Roman leave and felt nothing. Just confirmation that systems work when you understand how to use them. Frank shook my hand outside afterward. How's the region performing? We closed 4.2 million last quarter, I reported, a quiet satisfaction in my voice. Up 18% from Roman's best. Retention's at 94%. That's what good management looks like, Frank said, a genuine smile gracing his lips. Diane's up for SVP next month. You interested in regional VP when she moves up? 5 regions instead of 1? I'd been managing 1 region for 6 months. Regional VP meant 5 regions, 40 employees, a budget 10 times larger. That was significant. Your numbers say you can handle it. Think about it. Let me know by end of week. I drove back, the winter sun glinting off the icy roads, thinking about Roman in that hearing, trying to explain why he'd scheduled someone through their wedding ceremony. Thought about Monica and Ben and Christina, forced out for choosing family. Thought about how I'd been ready to lose everything, my future with Rachel, my career, my financial stability. And the only thing that saved me was keeping proper records. Rachel called while I was driving. How'd it go? Dismissed. Roman's responsible for costs. It's over. Good. She paused, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Frank offered you regional VP yet? How did you know? Diane called me last week to ask if you'd be interested in relocating if needed. Her voice was steady, confident. I told her yes. You made that decision without asking me? I laughed, a genuine, relieved sound. I made the decision that we go where the opportunity is. You earned this. Take it. Yeah, I'm taking the promotion. Good. Now come home. We're celebrating, and I'm not taking no for an answer. I thought about that confrontation, Roman's face when he realized emails and timestamps beat authority every time. The arbiter dismissing his case because the evidence was overwhelming. Loyalty is attendance, that was Roman's signature line. Turns out, loyalty is actually showing up for the people who show up for you. What other toxic managers were out there, still building their petty kingdoms?